Oh, welcome to the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You figured that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. Oh, we have quite the show today. A fabulous Friday, and a Friday that follows I would say a pretty surprising draft pick, all things considered, for your team, your town, your Philadelphia Eagles. Howie Roseman gets it done again. I think it's probably about time that I atone for some sins, okay? I'm going to start the show with a quasi-apology because years ago, this is years ago, 2019, I think, maybe early 2020, I was doing a show on 610 ESPN radio in Philadelphia, and I questioned Howie Roseman as an executive at the time. This is back in 2019. Don't hold this against me, okay? But friends, I don't know what to tell you right now except for this, and it's very, very simple. Howie Roseman just continues to work his magic. There were rumors flying late last night that potentially other teams were unwilling to take Howie's phone call. If you go back to Wednesday's show, there was that anonymous quote provided that said something to the effect of, if we see a 215 area code number on draft night, we're blocking the call. And I got to tell you, it is honestly one of the craziest things to watch as last night unfolded. There were two things that I wanted to keep an eye on. Well, I will be honest, okay? I think many of you know me enough at this point that, I don't really follow college football much. That might change at some point. I've just never really gotten into it. I don't have a dog in the fight. I got the Westchester Golden Rams down in Division II. Oh, poor Ramey's head. Hold on. Let's fix Ramey's head. There we go. That's a little bit better. I got those guys. But I don't have a team that I kind of hang my hat. As a kid growing up in Schuylkill County, you're kind of indoctrinated into cheering for Penn State. Of course, you have Harvard on the highway, Penn State Schuylkill campus in Schuylkill, Haven, Cressona-ish area. So you kind of root for Penn State, but then you're kind of used to just being let down and disappointed. So, I don't watch a lot of college football until we get closer to the playoffs, and when we get to, the SEC championship game, I'll watch that. And so it's always been kind of funny to me that for a very long time, Howie Roseman seemed almost allergic, almost like he felt a horrible, guttural, visceral reaction to the idea of drafting players from the SEC. It was afraid or just unwilling to take guys from Georgia or maybe take guys from Alabama. And then we've seen over the last few years the dividends that drafting those guys has played. Listen, on the offensive side of the ball, you have Devontae Smith, absolute stud, Heisman winner, all that great player who you would not have won the Super Bowl without. You would not have had as big of a season as you did a season ago had it not been for Devontae Smith. So you love that. And then you look on the defensive side of the ball and go, all right, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith. You look at these guys and you go, oh, wait a second. So if Howie realized if I draft very talented defensive players, and some of those defensive players come from the SEC, especially if those players come from one of the best teams in the SEC, perhaps in Alabama, perhaps in Georgia, this could work out? You mean to tell me that success may end up making its way into the NFL? Oh, yeah, it does. It does. And so I was shocked last night on two fronts. I have to admit that so much of why I watched, I didn't even really fully apologize to Howie. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm done. When you watch the draft, right, typically you're used to seeing the Eagles pick in the teens, maybe in the 20s, typically later in the 20s. You get to last night, and I have to be honest, for as little as I watch college football, I couldn't get myself hyped up for this draft. Now, there are people who it's their full-time job to get excited about the draft and to break down all the prospects and all that. It's not my full-time job. It's not what I really care about doing. And I'm not going to fake it. I'm not going to tell you that I've been watching these guys and watching their film and that I really believe in insert name of player who realistically a bunch of these people have probably watched play on highlights or maybe have watched a couple of games live. There are so many people that fake this, not just in Philadelphia, but fake it in other markets as well. And we got to be honest here, friends. I don't think it's the way to go. So I often defer to what some of the pundits do and the people who actually do care about covering the draft and covering college football and then projecting these players to go on. So I think that it's probably a good idea that we take a greater look at where Jihaad Campbell was expected to go and then kind of talk about why Howie kind of pulled, I'd almost call it like dark magic. It's almost like black magic. This guy continues to figure out a way to take advantage of other GMs. And now in this case, Kansas City wasn't going to take Campbell, but like you make a deal to move up one spot to just guarantee that the guy that has been falling and somebody that Howie went on to say after the draft was top 10 on their board, a guy who, like, had it not been for injuries, probably would have been, I would imagine, a top 15 pick, just on, based on what I've been able to kind of deduce here. When you take all that into consideration, like, it's a hell of a pick. It's a hell of value. And, the involuntary thumbs up from the Apple computer here is going to keep shooting up. But, like, in fairness, it is kind of a thumbs up night if you're Howie Roseman. You didn't have to part with a lot to move up that one spot. And again, you walk away with a guy who has tremendous value. Like, if you think back to when Jalen Carter fell to the Eagles, there were people from all across the league saying, how the hell did that happen? And how did the Eagles end up with him? And now in Campbell, you have a guy who played inside linebacker, could potentially help you fortify inside. And then I saw Elliott Shore-Parks earlier today, or maybe it was last night, I think it was this morning on WIP's morning show, said something about like him viewing Campbell as more of an edge guy, and that in a 3-4 system, maybe you have Nolan Smith on one edge, and then you have Campbell on the other, and that when Campbell was initially recruited, it was as an edge guy, not as an inside linebacker. Now listen, Nakobe Dean might not be ready, or I think is not expected to be ready for the start of next season. Could you see Campbell maybe get a look next to Zach Bond early in the season? Probably. Does this thing eventually develop over time where Nakobe Dean slides back to the interior and you shift Campbell back outside? Entirely possible. But I got to tell you, for a long time, I've wondered aloud why the Eagles don't draft the linebacking position. And it feels like whether he's going to play inside or if he's going to be an edge guy, either way, it's a huge get for this team. Massive. And the value at 31 is incredible. This also brings me to the allergens that are in the air, friends. The people who watch the show just saw what happened. Those who listen to the podcast feed just heard beautiful silence. But I'm really excited about this pick. And it's not because I sat down and watched every Alabama game. It's because I look at where he was projected to go, and it's where I hear people talking about where Campbell could have gone and should have gone and what he will end up being. And from everything that I have seen, from everything that I have read, from people that I trust and people that I do respect that evaluate these players, break down the All-22 film, I think the Eagles got a home run here based off of all of those learnings. I have yet to see somebody that I highly respect in the football world say that this was a mistake. Was there a surgery? Yes. Could there be injury concerns down the line? Potentially. Does it really matter? No, because at 31, it's a little bit of a crapshoot, right? The end of the first round can be a little bit of a crapshoot. You're not looking for an impact player like a team that's in the top 10 or the top 5, even the top 15. If you get a guy who can contribute in a meaningful way to winning and a winning culture at 31, that's a huge win. That is a massive coup for an organization. I honestly thought going into Thursday night, it was more likely that the Eagles were going to trade back and out of the first round. And in fact, I think it was around pick number 20 and down, I think there were 3 trades. It might have been more, but there were 3 trades that included a team moving up and trading a 2026 first-round pick just to get back up into the 20s, which I thought was kind of wild. And then I went, wow, is Howie really going to finesse a first-round pick that might even be better next year from a team that really needs a player? Is he going to somehow get a better first-round pick next year, higher than what 31 or 32 would have been this year? But again, when you have a player like this that falls to you, and I will take Howie at his word from, after the draft, that Campbell was in their top 10, if that guy falls, you need to find a way to make it up. Now, I mentioned earlier that apparently there were teams that were not willing to trade with the Eagles. And while we kind of joked about it on a Wonderful Wednesday episode, Ian Rappaport, I believe, was the one who put out about Howie and the fact that the Eagles were trying to move up and were unable to because there were a lot of teams that simply would not make a trade with the Philadelphia Eagles, that they were worried about trying to get up and go after anyone. And this was back around the 20s. And it was also put out there that the Eagles tried to trade up to take the Chargers spot in the first round. So I want to first go to this report from Ian Rappaport. This has happened after the Eagles had already executed the trade with the Chiefs and gotten up and got Jihaad Campbell. I want you to hear from behind the scenes what Ian Rappaport reported over on NFL Network and just get a better idea for like, wow, there are actually GMs in this league who are very clearly worried about being on the wrong end of a Howie Roseman trade. So let's first go out to Rappaport, and then we'll kind of bring it back in, and we'll add some additional context, and I'll tell you why I like the pick. All right, here goes. Ian Rappaport, again, this is after the pick was already made. Eagles get Jihaad Campbell. Here's what Rappaport had to say about Howie Roseman and trying to get up into an earlier part of the first round to go after Campbell.
But when the Chargers were on the clock at 22, he was working the phones trying to get a trade. They thought they had a trade, thought it was done. The Chargers ended up picking, tried to get at 23, again at 24, now get Campbell at 31. So, Rich, here's how bad.
I have to tell you, that is insane to me. They liked Campbell so much, they tried to get up to number 22. In that 22-23 range. And they were unable to do it. Now, I'd love to know what the potential trade was going to be. Like, I would actually like to know, how much did they like Campbell that they were willing to try to move up 10 spots in the draft? And what was that going to cost them? Was it going to cost them a ton of trade capital in this draft? Was it going to be potentially, again, as I mentioned, other teams we saw have to part with a 2026 first-round pick? Was Howie unwilling to move a 2026 first-round pick? And if so, good on him because it ended up working out anyway. But, man, like Howie's usually the guy who's able to get a trade done. So the fact that he couldn't move up is pretty wild. And then again, he gets the deal done and he gets his guy at 31. So then you go, all right, in the moment, it seems like highway robbery. Howie Roseman went out. He got arguably the second best linebacker in this draft. Injuries notwithstanding, you go, all right, potentially second best linebacker in the draft. But who said it? Where was he on big boards going into this draft? And so there were 4 people whose boards were aggregated together. I just want to double check that this like Twitter account isn't like some insane one. No, this looks okay. So I'll cite this one. Aiden Powers said that Campbell was 12th on Daniel Jeremiah's board, 13th on the Pro Football Focus board, 11th on the Ringers board, and 11th on Todd McShay's board. And the Eagles got him at number 31. So again, you had multiple pundits, you had multiple people who are, and outlets, because we'll include the Ringer in there, that are highly respected for their ability to evaluate talent and to build these big boards that people actually do care about and put stock into. And you have 3 of them that say this guy is like somewhere between the 11th and 13th best player in the draft, and he falls to 31. And the Eagles get him. It's hard to argue the value of the pick, right? I have yet to see anybody, as I mentioned earlier, poo-pooing on this selection. And I will also go to the fact that Jihaad Campbell seemed very, very excited about becoming a Philadelphia Eagle. So we're actually going to throw this out as he was on his way out to the stage. We'll mute this just for the sake of not getting a flag on the YouTube. But here's Campbell after it got announced that he was the pick. Here he goes. So he's yelling, "Come on and let's go." I just don't want the YouTube and the ESPN to flag the channel and flag the video. Although I actually recently won a couple of appeals from the fine folks at Fox Sports from earlier in the run of the Russ Joy Show. So I will say the fine folks at Fox Sports, they get my tip of the cap for removing the copyright claims that they had on some stuff in the videos earlier on in the history of the show. But anyway, Campbell's really excited. And this is the beauty of doing the show a little bit later today. Part of why we're doing this later is because I knew at some point the Eagles were going to put out that behind-the-scenes clip, that thing that you get to be in the war room briefly, ever so briefly, where you get to hear the two-way call between the organization and the player. So I think it's important that you just kind of get to feel the energy around Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie, Nick Sirianni, as they talk to their new first-round draft pick, and a guy who, like, in fairness, I have to imagine Vic Fangio is absolutely foaming at the mouth to experiment with on the field. So we're going to go out to last night's conversation on the phone. This is Jihaad Campbell, Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie, Nick Sirianni, and we'll break it down as we go. But a really cool moment in a young player's career. Here's Howie. We're going to throw. Look how happy Howie is. Look how happy. He's thrilled.
We got you. You are a Philadelphia Eagle. Officially, we're on the clock right now. We just made a trade. Congratulations. We are so excited, man.
Hey, Jihaad, unbelievable.
Hey, what's up?
We were trying to get you for the last hour. You fit right in perfectly.
Hey, by the way, I want to go back to what Jeffrey just said, what Jeffrey Lurie just said, okay? Because this is the part that corroborates what Rappaport said, right? Like, in theory, sometimes the national media people come out and they're like, oh, yeah, they really liked him, 5 picks earlier, 10 picks earlier, right? But, like, there it is. There's the owner of the team saying, we spent an hour trying to get you, which does, in fact, kind of confirm what Rappaport put out, that the Eagles were trying to get back up into the early 20s to make a move for Campbell. All right, we'll replay that and keep going.
Hey, Jihaad, unbelievable.
Hey, what's up?
We were trying to get you for the last hour. You fit right in perfectly. And unbelievable. Jihaad, congrats, man.
Jihaad, Coach Sirianni here.
Hey, what's up, baby?
Hey, congratulations,
Sirianni,
man.
how you doing?
I'm doing good. How about
Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Hey,
I'm doing good, man. Hey,
let's go.
I'm just blessed, man. To add more value to the team, man.
Hey,
You have to love that, to add more value to the team.
we know you're going to do that. Sorry you had to wait a little bit. Go enjoy your night. I'm sure we'll see you tomorrow. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to spending.
So that's a really cool moment. And again, I love that kind of stuff. I know that, like, I don't think there's anybody who hates it. Some people maybe put a little bit too much into it, but the sound of joy of a player reaching the highest level of their respective sport. And, like, listen, you have to imagine that if you're Campbell at that point, and again, there were so many pundits that thought you could maybe be a top 15 pick. You have this surgery. There are a couple of injury concerns. Your stock starts to kind of drop a little bit on draft day. You're maybe starting to wonder, oh my God, like, I'm here, I'm at the draft. Am I going to fall out of the first round? And, like, there's probably a sinking feeling that hits your stomach. And then there you are, 2 picks away from, I don't want to say the shame, but certainly the disappointment. You're going to feel disappointed. Your family's probably going to feel kind of bummed out for you. But, like, you're 2 picks away from maybe not getting drafted on the first draft night. And here you are, and you get drafted by the reigning Super Bowl champions, who, oh, by the way, in fairness, and we're going to throw this over to Andrew Fawcett, says, let's mention the fact he's from South Jersey, Timber Creek High School. He's a local-ish guy. That's pretty freaking cool. That's something that, like, I don't know, call it, maybe it's not divine intervention. Just call it fate. Call it whatever you want to call it. Pretty cool. So a South Jersey kid ends up drafted by the reigning Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. It's a great moment. And the last one I'm going to go to here, the last thing that I wanted to try to get to before we kind of wrap it up on Campbell and about him falling to the Eagles is that, listen, before the draft happened, Mina Kimes was over on ESPN, and when they were talking about what players could potentially fall, what players could potentially provide the best value, like if this guy starts falling down boards, who's the guy most likely to be looked at as the steal of the draft? And Mina Kimes happened to call out Jihaad Campbell. So we're going to go over to Mina Kimes. Now remember, this is before the draft happened. This is prior to him falling from that early teens positioning that people expected him to be all the way down to number 31. Let's listen now.
He asked that.
Ooh, I get to talk about my draft crush. Ryan knows who this is. Jihaad Campbell. Oh, my God. Oh, the linebacker out of Alabama. I think he has everything it takes tools-wise to be one of them elite linebackers in the NFL.
So, now remember, Mina Kimes is paid full-time to be somebody who assesses football. So I will always give the tip of the cap and defer. She's not referring to him as an edge guy here, as a linebacker. And then you look at the stat on the screen there, 11.5 tackles for loss in 13 games last season for Alabama, who happened to play in a very good conference. Okay, we'll continue.
Athleticism is the first thing I'll point out. True sideline to sideline range. The closing speed, pops. He's got tremendous wingspan, and it shows up in zone coverage. He's always getting in passing lanes, interfering with the ball. And then he's a good pass rusher, too.
So you have sideline to sideline range, and explosiveness, and maybe a surprising quickness getting to the quarterback. He's in passing lanes. He can read the quarterback well. He can read potential routes well enough to get involved in deterring a quarterback from going a certain way with the ball. Oh, and by the way, he can also get to the quarterback as a pass rusher. We continue.
Was the first step. I believe he started as a pass rusher. Now there's things he can improve upon. I think he's got to play a tick faster to the run, gets fooled a little bit by misdirection, but that will come in the NFL. Look, he might fall because he had the surgery and there's injuries and whatnot. I'm telling you, a few years down the road, if he falls, we're going to look back on him and say, how on earth did he fall?
And that's what we love, because the idea that the Eagles once again found a guy who was falling for whatever reason, obviously the surgery, the injury concerns were probably a big reason that he fell. The Jalen Carter reason for falling, very different circumstances. However, you look at it and you go, that's another player who fell to a spot that he probably shouldn't have, and the Eagles were able to take advantage. I don't usually get this excited about first-round picks, especially when I haven't done the film work on them. But when you look at this across the board, and I would love, if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments over on YouTube, X, or Facebook, or if you're watching after the fact on YouTube, or if you're listening after the fact in a podcast feed, let me know who I missed. I have actively sought after anyone I would respect in the football world who says, oh, this is too much of a gamble for him to go at 31. It all appears to be people saying, what an absolute steal for the Philadelphia Eagles. So that is a great sign. Just when you have the across-the-board approval of the pick, and you're talking about the incredible value and how the hell did the guy fall, that's great stuff. So we'll obviously hope collectively that the injury, that the surgery went well. He was moving pretty damn well, banging on the wall, feeling he's probably okay. Now, Mina Kimes said that he needs to work on maybe playing a tick quicker, and also that he might need to work on getting thrown off by misdirection. Who do you want to have bringing that guy under their wing more than Vic Fangio? I know that there were clips going around last week about Brandon Graham still getting his workouts in. And people starting to go, oh, is Brandon Graham coming back? If I'm the Eagles, right, I probably want Brandon Graham to stay retired, right, because it was a perfect way to go out. But I'm probably doing close to whatever it takes to make sure that Brandon Graham is around the team again next year. Because if the idea is to potentially move Campbell outside and maybe to make him a more adept pass rusher and somebody who can get to the quarterback, you could certainly do a lot worse than having Brandon Graham take that guy under his wing. I love the idea of Brandon Graham being around Jihaad Campbell in some meaningful way and kind of helping to guide this young guy to the next level. I think that this could ultimately be a massive steal. We shall see. If at this point, let's just say next season, we get 10 games in and Campbell's not playing and he's healthy, well, then you probably go, oh, it's not ideal. But if Nakobe Dean isn't healthy or isn't ready to start the season, and now this guy is starting inside next to Zach Bond, and you got that value at 31, it's a hell of a move. All right, I'm actually going to go over to the comments now. This is the longest, I think, in a long time that I've gone without saying Heidi-ho to the people. But Greg Bondarenko says, afternoon all. Andrew Fawcett with the greetings. Joe Papel says, happy Friday, everyone. Landros 2 says, great pick, could be a home run. Landros 2 also says, maybe we can get Howie to handle the Flyers draft. Amy says, nice to see someone happy to play for a Philly team. I don't know how, if you're a player coming to the NFL and the defending Super Bowl champions made a trade up, albeit only one spot, but they made a trade up, and then the owner gets on the phone and says, yo, we've been trying to move up for you for over an hour. Man, you got to feel good. If you're Campbell at this point, you have to feel incredibly valued by this organization. And again, he's a South Jersey kid, and now he gets to play for the Eagles, who are coming off a Super Bowl, who appear to have a nice open window to potentially create a dynasty of their own. It's a hell of a time. If he weren't happy, I would be legitimately worried in every possible way. Ford is here. It's a Ford Friday. Says Howie is a monster. Greg Bondarenko says born in Gloucester Township, New Jersey. D.D. Skinner says, I freaking love his vibe. I see some stuff about hockey. We're going to get there a little bit later on. So I'm going to have to just kind of scooch around there for a second. Allison says, hello. Let's see. Jay Grebby says, oh, wait, no, hold on. Was that about this? No, that is about hockey. Hold on. We'll get back there. We'll get back to the hockey stuff in a second. So that's the Campbell pick. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't point out what the hell happened. And the real reason that I was so excited to watch the first round of the NFL draft, it had nothing to do with the Eagles got to move up. Hold on, let's go Merrill Reese. Let me take a sip of coffee before I go into Merrill Reese voice. It was not about whether I thought the Philadelphia Eagles were going to make a move from number 32 in the first round of the NFL draft. I was more concerned to see what would happen to Shedeur Sanders, a player who many believe could have been one of the top quarterbacks taken in this draft. And Shedeur Sanders fell. And he fell, and he fell, and he fell, and he fell, and he fell. And I was not celebrating the fall of Shedeur Sanders, but I did say on Wednesday's show, I had to imagine that we were going to see a fall that was going to almost look like what happened with Aaron Rodgers. And I saw people last night going, no, you can't compare Shedeur Sanders and Aaron Rodgers. How dare you? How dare you compare the two falling? I mean, listen, the Shedeur Sanders thing is wild because if you go, and we have to be fair here, okay? And I like to try to be fair. Before the draft, there were some executives, some unnamed executives, and I think there was an unnamed coach or two, who had said to a few of the national media pundits, we had a meeting with Shedeur Sanders, and it was not what we expected. He didn't seem to take it seriously. There were some that said maybe there was a feeling of entitlement, that there was a feeling of not taking the process seriously, that maybe he thought he was a shoo-in to be a top 5 pick. And so then you had those things got put out. And then you had some people who said, well, that's very just clearly racism, which I'm always kind of interested in the thought process. But all right, so that's the people who thought that he was being disrespectful or not taking it seriously or racist. Okay. And so then it was Sanders might fall. He might not be the first quarterback taken, but he'll definitely be taken in the top 10. There are teams that need quarterback help. And as you're watching the first round of the draft, you start looking at a nice section of teams where you go, these teams don't need quarterbacks. Are we going to see somebody trade back from the middle of the first round to later so somebody else can move up? And then as he keeps falling, you see Pittsburgh there at 21. You go, all right, let's lay out everything that's happened. Pittsburgh does not have Justin Fields anymore. They don't have Russell Wilson anymore. They really don't have a quarterback of value on their roster right now. They could use a quarterback. The only name that has really been brought up, especially of late with Pittsburgh, is Aaron Rodgers. But Aaron Rodgers went on to Pat McAfee's show a week ago and said that yeah, he talked to the Steelers and he talked to Mike Tomlin, had a lot of respect for them, a lot of respect for the process, a lot of respect for all these things, right? And unfortunately, I'm at a spot where I actually did talk to a Pittsburgh fan today. It was just a Pittsburgh fan. It was a Steelers fan. And I said, hey, were you surprised that listen, your team unfortunately does not have a quarterback. What do you think? Did you think that your team was going to take Shedeur Sanders at 21? And he said, what the hell was his word? He was lamenting it, I think he said. He didn't want to see the Steelers take Shedeur Sanders. Now, why? I don't know. I saw people comparing, and NFL Network was interesting, the dichotomy between, or the juxtaposition, if you will, of ESPN talking about Shedeur Sanders as if he was a surefire top 5 pick, and the NFL Network that really kind of seemed to approach it from the standpoint of he's a guy, he might be a first-round pick. They didn't seem to be losing their minds the entire night like ESPN was, and I was going back and forth between the two. It is wild to watch Sanders fall the way that he did, and then to talk to a Pittsburgh fan this morning, and they're like, I didn't want them to take him in the first round. This guy said to me, I'd be okay if the Steelers got him in the third or fourth round, it would be fine. And I'm like, holy shit, we're talking about a guy that for a lot of the college football season was being talked about as like maybe the number one pick in the draft or maybe the first quarterback off the board. So again, I'm watching this on Thursday night, and when the Steelers come up, I'm like, all right, this is probably a good time. They legitimately don't have a quarterback. And as I was mentioning before, Rodgers goes on McAfee's show and essentially says, yeah, I talked to the Steelers, but like there's no deal in place. So you go, okay, well, one of two things is going to happen here. The Steelers are either going to take Shedeur Sanders because they don't have a quarterback, or they're not going to take him, and then maybe that tells you they are going to sign Rodgers. But I don't even know if that's the case. It's an absolute mess. It's an absolute disaster. So then Pittsburgh goes up. They do not draft Shedeur Sanders. And then you go, holy shit. Where are we going from here? Because this is bad. This is bad, very bad. If you're a fan of Shedeur Sanders or the Shedeur Sanders brand or Deion Sanders, and like you're looking at it from like the perspective of a father who really believes his son was one of the best players in the draft, this had to feel horrible. And you're watching him fall and fall and fall. And when Pittsburgh didn't take him, all I kept thinking to myself was, this is going to get worse. I was like, he's going to fall out of the first round. Because once Pittsburgh didn't take him, I was like, this is it. Like this, it's it. It's done. It's over. There's no chance. There's no one else that's going to take him. And then you get New York. And New York makes a trade to get to number 25. They acquire the pick from Houston. And I go, I was like, wow. So the Giants might actually, they might take Shedeur Sanders. And in fairness, going into this draft, if you go back a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, there was the thought out there that like, if Shedeur Sanders had been available to the Giants at number 3, maybe they would have taken Sanders there. Again, this is like weeks or months ago. And like, obviously when Abdul Carter's there, you take Abdul Carter. But like when you see the Giants make this trade with Houston at 25, you go, oh, they're going to get their quarterback. For better or worse, they're going to get the guy that they're going to invest in long-term. Deion Sanders, as the father, is going to be able to help his son, kind of navigate the New York media market. And you go, okay, this kind of makes sense. Except the Giants don't do it. The Giants draft Jackson Dart, who I have to be honest with you, what is Jackson Dart? Is he, I don't know. And if you look at a lot of the rankings that people had of where Jackson Dart was going to go, it certainly wasn't going to be number 25. So then you go, oh shit. Like when they pick Dart, I'm looking at the rest of the board and I'm like, there's nobody else. Detroit doesn't need a quarterback. Washington doesn't need a quarterback, nor does Buffalo, Philly, Kansas City. I made or Baltimore. I kind of made the joke over on Twitter. I was like, if Shedeur Sanders falls to 32, should the Eagles take him? 610, 632. Like, of course not. But I was like, oh my God, like Sanders is really going to fall out of the first round. I can't believe it. And then he did. Now, I am not one of the people that enjoys the schadenfreude at the expense of the human being. I enjoy the story. And as I'm watching this guy fall, I'm like, you know what? Is this a message being sent by the NFL as a whole? Is this a message being sent to Deion Sanders? Is this a message being sent to the player? Because I'm going to go full circle here. There were those reports prior to the draft that he might not have been taking the process seriously. And again, there were some people who said it was racially based commenting and saying it anonymously is gutless and all that. And then there were some that was like, well, he's just not that good of a player. He's not truly a top 10 player, and he is going to fall. But I have to be honest, I was shocked, honestly, that he fell all the way out of the first round. And when I said at the top of the show that I thought it was more likely the Eagles were going to trade out of the first round, as this was developing, and after the Giants took Jackson Dart, I said to myself, this is where Howie's going to clean up. Because there will be a team in the second round who is going to get desperate and say, all right, Shedeur Sanders is still there at 32. We'll trade a 2026 first-round pick, maybe another pick this year, maybe another pick next year. Like, could you have theoretically gotten whatever the second-round pick is this year, next year's second-round pick, and next year's first-round pick out of whichever team it is, so that team could go up and get their quarterback and Shedeur Sanders? That's what I thought could happen. and it clearly did not. That is like, listen, if it was a message being sent, I have to imagine that the message has been received loud and clear. And I'll tell you what, whoever gets Shedeur Sanders today, because it has to happen tonight. I have to imagine he's going in the second round, right? If not, if also the third, holy shit. But whoever is going to get him is not going to get the potential bad attitude or entitled kid. They're going to get somebody who's got a big old chip on their shoulder. And I will tell you that I will happily root for Shedeur Sanders' success in this league, unless it comes against the Eagles. But like, this is like a slice of humble pie. So we'll see what happens. Let's see. I'm going to go back over to the comments here really quick because KW1323 thought that Shedeur crashing out was hilarious. Andrew Fawcett also thought it was funny. Says he falls out of the first. D.D. Skinner says thunk, which I guess is the sound that it made when he fell out of the first round. Landros 2 says Sanders fell. The hype machine didn't work. Yeah, I don't know. Andrew Fawcett asks, does his pop have anything to do with it? Here's the only thought that I had about whether or not Deion Sanders was also kind of being punished in this, okay? I know that one of the easy comparisons that people tried to make last year, and I guess this season too, was that like they were comparing Deion Sanders and Shedeur Sanders to LeVar Ball and Lonzo Ball. That you have this very outspoken parent who's hyping up their kid, believes their kid is one of the best, and wants to see their kid succeed. And I know that like there are people who get really in their feelings about the idea of a father, really pushing their kid towards greatness or pushing their kid. I think it's a good thing. I think as long as it's a healthy relationship, it's a good thing. I'd rather see a father be there for their kid, even if it means that the father's maybe going above and beyond, maybe overboard. I'd rather that than the alternative, right? And the alternative, well, I mean, I guess there are multiple versions of this, right? Like I, as a parent, will advocate for my kids, but we teach our kids, like, you need to advocate for yourself first. If there's an issue, you need to speak up for yourself first. And if that doesn't work, we're happy to support you and to help you. That goes like, whether it's the classroom, whether that's in sports, you need to speak up for yourself. And if that doesn't work, we're happy to help. You won't see me on the sideline of a game losing my ever-loving mind like a psycho. I don't like those parents that are like way overboard about like a kid's game. But when you're talking about a parent who is trying to hype up their kid as they're going into the pros, I'm okay with it if it's not a distraction and if it's not something that ultimately hurts their kids' chances of finding success. LeVar Ball promoted the big baller brand, and Lonzo got taken high in that draft, and yet his career didn't work out the way that he would have liked to or that LeVar would have wanted it to, but he got his kid on the map. In fact, he got 3 of his kids on the map. One's now rapping, one is still in the NBA, having a pretty good career. Lonzo, so I actually kind of felt bad for Lonzo that it didn't work out. Although I think he's still kind of floating around in the league. And then if you look at Shedeur Sanders, like this isn't the end for Shedeur Sanders. He doesn't like not get drafted in the first round, then fall off the face of the earth. Like he's still going to have a good career. Like Nick Saban talked about this last night during the draft, and he was on like the game day set. And he said, I honestly wish that we weren't talking about him falling. He's like, I think that we built up this idea of where he was supposed to go, and I don't think it was fair. And when you have Nick Saban saying that on the set, it's kind of like the kick in the ass, maybe even like a little punch to the testes that like, yo, we are creating way too big of a story out of this. And like, it is sort of schadenfreude. It is kind of like you start in the local news with the fire and the shooting and a hurricane and like a tsunami and like all this like death and sadness. And like, that's the way that you like lead the A block on the local news because it gets eyeballs. No, like at some point you have to probably say, yo, we kind of need to stop focusing on this guy falling and maybe like start talking about the players who are being taken. And if we loop back around to this and the guy falls out of the round, well, then that's a conversation for post-draft. I gotta tell you, Cam Ward is like the guy that I feel the worst for because he goes number 1 in the draft to Tennessee. Not a single soul is talking about Cam Ward today. Not a single soul is talking about the fact that this kid got taken number 1 by Tennessee. Why? Most of it is because Shedeur Sanders fell. Another part of it is because Jacksonville executed an absolutely wild trade with Cleveland to go up and get Travis Hunter, who happened to play with Shedeur Sanders. But those were like the two big stories coming out of the draft. Travis Hunter trade by Jacksonville and Shedeur Sanders falling out of the first round. And now, in fairness, here I am talking about it the next day. But I'm reacting at the end of the draft, at the end of the first round, to talk about the macro perspective on his fall. Not in the moment, constantly going back and saying, wow, Shedeur Sanders, I think he's feeling pretty bad right now. I think he feels like an idiot yet? You think his dad feels bad? So to answer Andrew's question, his dad might, like I don't know. I don't know if teams or the league were trying to send a message to him and his dad. What I would say is that if you're a head coach of a football team and you're kind of on tenuous footing, you might not want to have taken Shedeur Sanders because you might fear for your own job security. Right? Like there could be the idea that Shedeur Sanders ends up in your organization. If you're a coach who's kind of on their last legs potentially with the team, if it doesn't turn around, you're probably feeling like Deion Sanders might be gunning for your job. If you're a GM, do you want to deal with a very vocal Deion Sanders? Because that could put you on very tenuous footing. So I don't know. I guess it's like a very long way to answer that question. These are thoughts that I have. Let's see. I see a bunch of stuff. Landro says, I do think his dad had something to do with it. Amadeo says, should have drafted Sanders just for the QB factory memes. KDub1323 says, no one seems to want to deal with the whole Prime experience. And that could be it. That honestly could be part of it. I have no clue. I said earlier that he has a chip on his shoulder. Ford calls it a big old Chip Kelly on his shoulder. We're talking about Chip Kelly now because Chip Kelly now is a much bigger chip than the one who coached here. In fairness. Sutliff over on YouTube says it might be the best thing for Sanders to have a chip on his shoulder. I agree. And again, I think he's going to have a successful career. I don't think he's a schlub. I certainly don't think that he is undeserving of being taken in this draft or taken early. So anyway, Greg Bondarenko notes ESPN's mock draft has Elijah Arroyo from Miami going to the Eagles in the second round. I would not be surprised if that happens. I would not be surprised if the Eagles look at a tight end because remember, this whole thing with Dallas Goedert is very interesting. Now, I don't know what's going to happen there, right? It feels like the Eagles might have wanted to restructure. Goddard didn't want to do it, or they were going to try to have Goddard take less money, and he's like, I just helped you win a Super Bowl. I don't like that. I don't know. That's a weird scenario and a weird situation, but it does feel like they're going to probably have to get a tight end at some point in this draft, you would think. Dak asks, will Milroe fall to the third in your opinion? Well, Dak Prescott, thank you for joining the show. I appreciate that. I don't think you have a lot to worry about in Dallas, Dak. He might fall to the third round. And if he does, then you might be in a little bit of trouble there, Dak. Maybe. Just kidding. You're not Dak Prescott unless you are. Let's see. Jim Cochran says, all these rumors about Sanders having bad attitude, if they aren't true, some team is getting a steal today. I agree. 100%. He says there are a lot of successful athletes with bad attitude in pro sports. 100%. Totally true. Let's see. Jim Cochran thinks that the Browns made out really well in the Travis Hunter trade. Amadeo's right here. Micah Parsons' reaction to Dallas's pick was gold. The one that was actually gold is when he freaked out. What was the name of the receiver that got taken like a couple picks? Was it the 9th pick? Whatever, before Dallas. And he freaked out and he's like, that was supposed to be our pick. It was, I'm going to script this guy's name. We're going to go McMillan. We're just not going to say a first name. McMillan gets drafted out of Arizona. Receiver, taken by Carolina. Tet. Thank you, Dak. I appreciate it. Well, you're going to say Tet. I'll say Tet. Okay. He gets taken at number 8, and Micah Parsons freaks out. And he's like, that was supposed to be our pick. And instead, Dallas gets Tyler Booker. They get Tyler Booker, who plays offensive line. And Micah Parsons is not excited about that. Because while they needed a lineman, that's not the thing that's going to get you feeling frisky on the first night of the draft. Now, that's where I was at on the draft. I'm pretty sure that's where I wanted to stop and end on the draft. Now, there are a few other things that I did want to get to. So we've touched on Howie doing a great job getting Jihaad Campbell. We talked about the Shedeur Sanders fall. There was a third thing that I wanted to get to. It was hockey related. And I'm trying to remember if there was something else over in the comments here that spurred my thought process. I thought that there was something else. Oh, I'll answer this question from Jay Grebby. Says, Russ, need your hair care routine. As someone who has floundered in his attempts to grow flow, do you just not cut it and slick it back to get it that way? Well, Jay, it really does depend. There are many things you can do. Oftentimes, my hair looks like shice because I just don't try very hard. Today was just a very beautiful, I woke up. I've been working out more, so I work out in the afternoons. So instead of doing the morning shower, which I tend to enjoy doing, instead this morning I got up, I wetted the hair, I slicked it back, and you do like a little one of these, and you do a little one of these, and you just kind of, mess it up a little bit, and then eventually over time it kind of settles. You have to decide if you want the hair in the front, because you don't wear bangs. I'm not wearing bangs. You decide if you're going to have them long so you can tuck them behind the ear. You decide if they're going to be a little bit short, and I've seen people talk about sea salt spray. I have not gone down that route. If you want to use product in your hair, you could certainly do that. I don't have many tips. My mom owned a salon for a long time, for decades, owned a salon. And she was always on me about taking good care of my hair. And now I take decent care of my hair. I have to tell you, though, there are times I miss having really short hair where you can just dry it and it's done. And this does not dry particularly quickly, but here we are. Okay. 3 things from the hockey world, okay? We're going to start here. This might have been number 4. Maybe this was number 3. Greg Bondarenko noting something that happened in the hockey world. The Carter Hart trial went to a mistrial. Now, I call it the Carter Hart trial. It's the trial including 5 members of the 2018 Canadian World Juniors team. Carter Hart is one of the 5 people that has a charge against them. And this case was declared a mistrial. Now, I think it's really important that we are fair, balanced, and that we don't say the wrong thing on the show because it is such a serious case and it is something that has a ton of eyes on it. But Rick Westhead put out, and I mentioned the other day, he's the one that does all this great reporting on stuff that, in fairness, like I could not do, I do not have the stomach for. I flat out just don't understand how somebody's able to cover some of these things, but it's awesome that there is somebody who does it. Rick Westhead said, a mistrial has been declared in the SA trial of 5 former members of Canada's 2018 World Junior Hockey Team. Justice Maria Carroccia, unless she says Caraccia or Caraccia, but she's Italian, I assume, so it should be Carroccia, dismissed the jury this morning without giving them an explanation for the mistrial. A new jury will be selected today. And then Westhead follows that up with another tweet that says, the justice ruled that the media may report on her mistrial ruling, but may not publish more details about her decision. And then he notes that a media consortium is challenging that publication ban. A new trial is scheduled to begin later today, which I don't know if it's started yet. We're getting close to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, with a new jury of 14 members. And then he puts in parentheses, a mistrial is a trial that is not successfully completed due to a significant error or problem that prevents a fair verdict from being reached. Now, the one thing that I will say about the mistrial and why I think it's concerning is that there are a lot of people who, for better or worse, are going to look at this mistrial and say that it's because there were 11 women on the trial and 3 men and that the defense found it unfair. From what I have gathered about how the jury selection process works in Canada versus the U.S., that should not have been a factor. What is potential, what could have happened, is that one or more of the members of the jury could have lied about having no prior knowledge of these charges or of this case. That would be a very logical thing that could have happened. It is possible that they defied the judge's orders, because remember, I think it was on day 1 of the trial, the judge kind of set out that, like, you're allowed to find out certain things, but you should not research or be influenced by these sorts of things around the trial. And maybe somebody broke whatever the rules are in Canada for what you're allowed to access. That would be the most simple explanation. But in fairness to like Westhead's point, the reason that this media consortium is appealing the decision to not be able to put it out publicly is because now this is going to have people running rampant with ideas of why a mistrial was declared. And again, just based on the way that I understand jury selection works in Canada, if there had been an issue with the gender breakdown of the jury, this would have happened already. You're not going to get 3 days into the trial and go, you know what? Too much estrogen. Too much estrogen. We don't like the chance of being able to defend our client's mistrial. That's not how this works. But I've already seen people going off on Twitter. So I don't think that's what's happening. Now, what happens if another mistrial is declared? I don't know. I don't know Canadian law. Maybe I'll get somebody on who does know Canadian law. Hopefully there's no other mistrial. Like, hopefully this doesn't happen again. Hopefully, I keep saying this. These 5 guys have the right by law to clear their names and to get exonerated and to prove that they're innocent until proven guilty. And this plaintiff has the right legally to go after these guys and seek whatever is being sought and to try to get justice, whatever justice looks like. Both sides get to look for justice. This isn't good. 3 days into the trial, a mistrial being declared makes me wonder, like, did something happen in the courtroom? Was there something said by someone? Like, what happened that you got to a mistrial? And the fact that the judge won't allow the media to report it is just going to further create a chasm in the way that people look at this trial and look at this case. And it's going to create a lot of fake news, a lot of salacious rumors, many of which could have been kind of discarded had it not been for the gag order, I guess, on being able to report why the mistrial was declared. Dee Skinner says, correct, Russ. Thank you. Allison says, it's crazy how people don't know what a mistrial means. Yeah, I saw a bunch of people going, oh, see, they were innocent, so the trial's thrown out. Nope, that's not what happened. Could be possible, could be something that happens, but here we are. Let's see. Jim Cochran says, if you're interested in how these types of cases with athletes have historically been handled poorly, read the book Missoula by John Krakauer. I have not read that, but Greg Bondarega says there is no live recording during these trials, correct? I assume so. If they can't even put out why a mistrial was declared, I have to assume there's nothing that's going to get like leaked or there's going to be anything that gets put out publicly. So there's your like real quick update on the court case in Canada. As I mentioned before, Westhead put out there that apparently the second trial or the new trial with 14 new jurors is supposed to start today. So we'll see. Point number 2 in the hockey world is that there was a report put out, I believe it was in from a Russian news source, but it was about Alexander Nikishin, who was supposed to leave SKA and go to Carolina, and the thought was that Carolina was going to have him play in the playoffs. That was the thought, that when his contract being terminated or whatever with SKA was processed, that he was supposed to come over and play for Carolina, but he's not yet signed with Carolina, and so the agent spoke out. It's his Russian agent. Now, in fairness, probably important context to have here that I don't think everybody is aware of, and I'm not going to try to talk far too much on it because I don't have every version of this figured out exactly, right? Like the way that some of these players are dealt with and handled can vary, but there is what's the best way to put it? There are some players that come from the KHL that have representation from Russia that are different from the people who represent them in the U.S. So there are some players who have multiple agents, some on that side of the pond, some on this side of the pond. And it would appear that that is maybe the case here with Nikishin. And so we're going to pull this up really quick. So his agent explained what's been happening with the player and with Carolina. So the defenseman left SKA, came to North America, hasn't signed with Carolina, despite some kind of agreement being reached. So the interviewer asks, what reason is Carolina not signing a contract with him? And the agent says, because Carolina is one of the most difficult teams in terms of management. Everything is difficult with them. But we have very strong representatives overseas, the Cortex agency, who will resolve this issue in any case. Okay, so first of all, you have, I'm not sure, but this agent says good representatives overseas who are going to resolve it, but says Carolina is one of the most difficult teams in terms of management. Okay. Everything is difficult with them. Interesting, because we all remember what happened with Mikko Rantanen and the fact that they went and they traded Nashis and they brought in Rantanen for a very short period of time because then they figured out he won't re-sign. And then they dealt him to Dallas. And they got like a good return in Stankoven and some more, but that was not a good look for that organization. And now you have an agent saying, oh yeah, Carolina's just hard to deal with. Okay, so the interviewer says, can't agree on some conditions? And the agent says, and again, this is obviously translated, so it's not perfect, but okay. I don't see anything difficult there, but Carolina is behaving incomprehensibly, and not only for us, but for scouts, representatives of other NHL clubs. Everyone is shocked and outraged. But as I was told, this is never surprising because Carolina always behaves like this and with everyone. At the moment, we cannot comment on the situation because the club's actions defy common sense. If this continues, Alexander will either go back to SKA or we will ask for a trade. So let's just take a second. Let's recap the last few months for Carolina because it ain't pretty. Carolina trades Natchez. They bring in Rantanen from Colorado. Rantanen says, I'm not signing here. They have to trade Rantanen at the deadline to Dallas, get a decent return. I'd argue not the impact player that Rantanen is. So they look kind of stupid, but they are able to like sort of make things kind of okay. A little bit, but not great. They're able to kind of fix that situation, but not entirely. The way that the league looks at Carolina after that is totally different. I'm sure that the way that the Players Association looks at Carolina is probably not great after that debacle. Because again, even though you were able to go out and get Stankoven and get some other players, get some other assets, trading for a big name like Rantanen and then somehow not knowing he wasn't going to re-sign with you and then having to turn around and trade him before the deadline sets a weird kind of precedent. And now you have this player who negotiated, like, for however it happened, was let out of his contract by SKA in the KHL. He gets over here, presumably expects to play in the playoffs, and now he's not signed. And this Russian agent says, Carolina is one of the most difficult teams to deal with. They're behaving incomprehensibly. Everyone's shocked and outraged, but we were told not to be surprised because Carolina behaves like this with everyone and that their actions defy common sense. And now you have this player that was believed to be somebody who could be of value to Carolina. You have this agent saying that if they don't get this shit figured out soon, he's either going to go back to Russia or ask for a trade. You want to talk about an absolute disaster? If you're Carolina, this is pretty damn close. This is bad, very bad for the Hurricanes. So good luck. Now, I'm not going to take the gratuitous shot that I could. I'm not going to take the gratuitous shot about this is what happens when you take a blogger and turn them into a front office executive. I'm not going to do that. There are people who are. And listen, this guy has found success. Tulsky has found some success in this league. So he's not an idiot. But there are questions about whether or not like he has social emotional intelligence and like whether or not he understands how to deal with human beings and that like the game isn't a fucking spreadsheet, which in fairness, if you had read some of his stuff as a blogger, he very much looks at spreadsheets. He very much presumably looks at a lot of fucking spreadsheets and graphs and is very analytically based. But like at some point you have to look a human being in the eyes and try to find some kind of connection with them. And for better or worse, it sort of feels like he's not there. That this might not be his strong suit. And perhaps Carolina needs to find an assistant GM who can be the person to look across the table and kind of make a human connection. But it is a mess, an absolute mess in Carolina. People skills, They don't happen. It ain't happening there. Now, that is what we have on that. Jay Grabby said that the Nikishin Canes drama agent says, may ask for a trade. Go get him, Danny. York and Moore, get it done. I have no idea. If he becomes available, if you're Danny Briere and you believe in the player, sure. Why not? Jamie Rolla says, afternoon, Tulski may yet piss off Brind'Amour enough to get him to quit for us. Brind'Amour. Could Brind'Amour be in play? 610-632. Jay Grabby also says, maybe Tulski is an inside man. That's kind of a mess. It really is a mess in Carolina. Let's see. Greg Bondarenko says, sheesh, sounds like a dumpster fire with the Canes organization. Yeah, I mean, it's bad. James Bond Flyer says, I think that the Flyers are going to trade York just for insubordination. I don't know about that. CMZ says, Briere better be all over that, man. Maybe. James Bond Flyer says, Flyers should trade a second for Brind'Amour. He'd be a hell of a get. Again, I don't think it's going to happen. Average Warzone guy says that Nikishin should be available or should be a target if he's available. If these guys are actually available, they need to make one of them happen. I don't know what that's going to like. I don't know what that'll look like. Joe over on X says Colorado, Edmonton pick, and a second for Nikishin. Get it done, Danny. I've been saying to you guys for a while, I do think that Danny Briere is going to look at those late first-round picks as draft capital, or as trade capital, trade capital. I just don't see him using all three of the first-round picks. I would imagine that, like, punting one of them to 2026 for another first could maybe make sense. But I do think that, like, he's going to try to get creative. And, like, listen, if this player is available and he can help your team, you would be doing organizational malpractice to not at least have the conversation on the phone. You have to have a chat about it. That was point number 2 in the hockey world that I wanted to make. There is a third, believe it or not. And that third point is about something that I saw over on the Twitter. And there are times that I feel like I just need to get off of Twitter. There are times that, not because I am opposed to the person or I support the person who owns the platform. It's not that. And it's not that I feel like it eats up too much of the day or too much of the night or too much of the time, okay? It's not that. Sometimes I think I need to get off of Twitter because people are fucking stupid. And I'm starting to think that a lot of the stupidest people in the world exist on Twitter. I know. For some of you, you're laughing right now because you're like, of course, we all know that. But I wanted to believe that there were some smart people. Now, I am not saying that this person is stupid because they're not. I don't actually know who the person is that runs the account. But it's some of the people who respond. So it's not the first person, okay? Flyers Clips, not a stupid person. I don't know who Flyers Clips is, but Flyers Clips does a nice job, has a good account over on Twitter. No issue with Flyers Clips, to be fair. But says, not going to pretend like my dream for this offseason isn't Giroux coming back and mentoring Matvey. And I just replied with no. So you can kind of guess where this is going to go. 5 replies, 16 likes. We all kind of know where this is going to go. The Giroux stands are they're going to come for blood, baby, because that's what they do. Now, Anthony DeGracio makes a good point. Sarcastic. You don't want a leader from one of the most forgettable eras of Flyers hockey of all time? Are you even a real fan? Then you get this person with the GIF. Obi Trice 412 says yes. We get Sweaty Jowie. I don't know what that is, but says, shut the fuck up, Russ. Okay, I appreciate. Thank you. MST says, why? He doesn't block anyone. He can dish Mishkov on power play 1. He allows puck control through having the best faceoff percentage in the NHL. Allows Coots to slide down a line or two. Truly, what is the downside of a 2-year deal? Then you get this person, Jeff Singletary, responding. I do think he would actually block some guys. He's a left wing now. They already have Tip and Forster there. They have Bump, Grabankin, Peltier competing for the last 2 spots. Wouldn't hate G coming back, though. And this is the kind of person you get. We killed it. Says, because Russ thinks G was a failed player despite everyone understanding the front office was dog shit and did almost nothing to help him succeed outside of 2019 and 2012. Russ says outlandish shit about him for clicks and views. Don't listen to Russ. Okay. So this person, these are the kind of people that I'm just like, why? Why? I'll tell you why Claude Giroux shouldn't come back to Philly. I'll tell you why the Flyers shouldn't bring back Claude Giroux. He doesn't fit. He's not a center. He does jam up your situation on the wing. And I will also point out, I don't think Claude Giroux is a winning player. And people can whine and they can cry into their Claude Giroux pillows. They can take their Claude Giroux dolls and bobbleheads and they can make them shake their heads right now as I say it. But I don't think Claude Giroux is a winning player. I don't think he's got the winning DNA. I don't think he's going to help Matvei Michkov. I think Matvei Michkov would rip his fucking head off and shove it up his ass. Because Claude Giroux is not a winning player. I don't think Claude Giroux has ever really been a winning player. He's been a guy who can put up points. And to his credit, he is one of the best all-time point getters in Flyers history. And good on him. But he's not a fucking winning player. He's never been a winning player. When he played in Philadelphia, were there front offices that failed him? Yes, 100%. There were regimes in Philadelphia that did a shitty job of getting Claude Giroux help. No doubt, and I will give the guy that. There were entirely lost years where front offices did not fortify the team with enough top-end talent to help out Claude Giroux. But I will also point out that there were a number of years post the 2010 run to the Stanley Cup, post the trades of Richards and Carter, post the horrible injury that cost Chris Pronger his career and fundamentally altered probably the next 5 or 6 years of Flyers hockey, that this team did not do a good job of building a team. But there were still people in this city who, for some stupid reason, would compare Claude Giroux to Sidney Crosby. And it was a bullshit comparison at the time, and it has aged like sour milk. One guy is able to elevate everyone because he's going to go down as one of the all-time greats, and one is going to barely make a fringe case to try to make the Hall of Fame. They're not the same player. They wouldn't have been the same player. You could have put Claude Giroux in Sidney Crosby's Pittsburgh Penguins teams, and they wouldn't have won a fucking cup. You could have brought Sidney Crosby here. He probably would have taken the Flyers to at least a couple of conference finals because there are levels to this game. And the thing that people have never been willing to accept is that Claude Giroux is not one of the all-time greats. He might be one of the best Flyers forwards in the last few decades. He is not a generational talent. It didn't matter if you were going to go out and acquire 2 or 3 other guys that could have helped the team. They weren't going to win a cup with him. He's not a winning player. Go back to the end of his tenure with Philadelphia. Chuck Fletcher's losing his mind. He finally decides we're gonna trade Claude Giroux, probably 2 or 3 years too late. Hextall probably should have done it when really trying to tear the thing down to the studs. Never had the balls to do it or never had organizations or ownership's approval to do so. So Claude Giroux hangs out here for another 2 or 3 years when he shouldn't have been. Chuck Fletcher finally says, all right, fine, I'm going to trade you. Let's try to figure this thing out. There's an offer on the table from Colorado. Colorado, who could have won the Stanley Cup. Colorado, who Claude Giroux could have gone out to and hoisted the Stanley Cup with. It would have been a pretty much surefire thing to happen. And he says, no, I don't want to go to Colorado. No. He or someone around him says, I don't want to go to Colorado. Yeah, it's only for a couple of months. Yeah, unrestricted free agency's coming up. I don't want to go to Colorado. How about Florida? Yeah, I'll go to Florida, but only Florida. Don't even bother with other teams. The Rangers make a call. The Bruins make a call. The Caps make a... Nope. Colorado, absolutely not. But you could go and win a Stanley Cup there. No. Florida. Now, in fairness, Florida was in a really good position. Florida was in a really good spot to potentially make a deep playoff run. I would not have made them a cup favorite like I would have with Colorado because I want to go to Florida. So he does. And what happens? Nothing. They don't win. The year after he leaves, he doesn't choose to re-sign in Florida where he forced the Flyers' hands to go. He doesn't re-sign in Florida and try to win a cup there. He goes home to fucking Ottawa. Ottawa, the Senators. You may recognize them. They have been largely irrelevant for decades. Yes, they're in the playoffs right now and the Flyers aren't. And whoop-de-fucking-do. But he chooses to go to Ottawa. That is not a winning team. That has never really been a winning team in modern history. The Senators stink. And there was no one, not a single soul, not even the person with a plush and a bobblehead and a Claude Giroux hand-stitched sweater and blanket made of like different parts of t-shirts and rally towels and shit from his time in Philadelphia. Not even those people said, oh yeah, he's going to go win a cup with Ottawa. We all knew it. So if your goal isn't to win a Stanley Cup, what are you doing? You could have potentially or very strongly had a good chance of winning one in Colorado. You could have re-signed in Florida and gone after a cup there, but instead you went home to Ottawa. And you ain't winning a cup this year. Ain't going to happen. So when people say, oh, Russ just says shit for clicks and for views, that is not true. I don't think he's a winning player. And a winning player would want to go to a team where they can go win a Stanley Cup. And maybe in the 1 out of every 100 opportunities, there's a player who goes home to a team that has a legitimate chance of winning a Stanley Cup. We can all laugh at Toronto. We can all laugh at John Tavares for leaving the Islanders to go to Toronto. But like that was at least a team and has been a team that has been at or near the top of the Eastern Conference and has a chance every year to potentially get to a Stanley Cup and and I laugh at them too, but has a chance to go on and win a Stanley Cup. Going back to Ottawa wasn't that. So if you ask me, why do I not want Claude Giroux to come back to Philadelphia? I will refer you to where I lost a lot of respect for the player. When I was down covering that team. Now, in fairness, it wasn't every practice, it was games. It was all the home games. But going down in some of those Hextall years, going down in some of those Chuck Fletcher years, watching young players have to come out and answer questions post-game because the captain who was requested decided to make himself unavailable to the media. And like, people will think that this is like some kind of like, oh, you're just upset. No, there's a good way as a leader to handle responsibility. When you're the captain of a team and you're on the board to come out and speak to the media, you're expected to come out and speak to the media. That's just how the shit works. You don't like it, I don't know. Don't accept becoming the captain of the team. But for years, I would watch young guys from that team. We're talking about like the Phil Myers of the world, the Sanheims of the world, a younger Sean Couturier at that point, a younger Ivan Provorov at that point. These guys are coming out answering questions. I guess I'd throw Konechny in there too. These guys are being asked to answer all the questions because the captain didn't want to. How do you think that reverberates through a locker room? When you're getting your ass kicked every night and the captain isn't out there alongside you answering questions after another loss, how do you think that resonates in the locker room? You think it goes well? Do you think guys are like, oh, I get it? No, it doesn't. Now, it probably doesn't cause a huge rift in the locker room, but if I were a younger guy on a team, and I keep losing, and the guy who's supposed to be the one that we go to battle with, supposed to be leading the charge, that guy, oh, he'll be available after the coach. The media wants to come back around. After everyone is literally cleared out, you can go back and talk to him. No, sorry, that's not it. It's not it. Matvei Michkov is a guy who very clearly wants to win, has the killer instinct, has the heart of a champion, has the thing that you want, and he's got it at 20 years old. There was that clip the other day that I talked about. There was the quote about him reaching out to Tortorella, thanking him for being his first coach, and that Tortorella didn't expect to hear from him, but it meant a lot to him that he heard from Michkov. Michkov right now is going to be the spiritual leader of that team. It might not happen this year. It might happen 2 years from now, 3 years from now, but he's got it. He has that it factor. He has that killer instinct. That is what you want. That is the kind of player you want to build around. Going and taking a trip on the retro roller coaster, going back and getting somebody from a dark time in Flyers history and bringing them back to this team is not something that helps you move forward. It is something that will always feel like you got desperate and you made an acquisition of a player from yesteryear, from a time that it didn't matter, to now somehow work with these younger guys and take them to the next level. And I don't think it's there. That is it. That is all. I don't think he was a bad player. He's not. And I said it at the top. I don't think that he's a bad player. I really don't. I think he's a very good player. I said he's one of the top point guys of all time with the Flyers. He's one of their best forwards in decades. And yet I just don't think that he's the guy that you build around. And I don't think that he's a guy that you bring back into that locker room. And if that upsets you as a fan, I'm sorry. But I'm just telling you, that's where I'm at. Okay, I'm going to go to the comments. That went a little bit longer than expected. Video guy Amadeo's got some work ahead of him today. Ryan Reese says, Giroux coming back would feel like a step backwards, to be honest. There we go. Average Warzone guy says, we don't need a 38-year-old Giroux. I agree. Amadeo says he's also just in a steep decline. I don't know if it's a steep decline, but I don't see the point. Greg Bondarenko says, I'd rather bring back Yager to mentor than G. I'd be fine with bringing Yager back as like an advisor. Hell yeah, I'd get Yager back here to work with Mishkov from a coaching capacity. KW1323 says, amen, Russ. Jim Cochran says, Giroux, Brindamore, Tocchet, Briere, Jones. Can we get Lindros too? Maybe Tim Kerr, Roenick. How about Mike Bullard? Bring them all back. Greg Bondarenko also agrees. Amy says, Russ, I don't think this is going to quiet the Giroux stance. It's not. They're going to continue to get themselves worked up. Oh, they did him disservice. Listen, I will admit that there were years that this team could have done a better job, but there has been an over-evaluation of what Claude Giroux could be. I think he's a really good player, but he wasn't a generational talent, and he wasn't a guy that was going to lead you to a Stanley Cup. Amadeo says, one of the best Flyers of all time, not one of the best NHL players of all time. Interesting. K-Dub says that Giroux was mid. Jay Grebby says, bring back Matt Carl. If we can't get David Carl to coach, might as well hire his brother. Greg loves a good rant. Sean C. says he went home. They got to Brinkett that same year, too. It's been a slog for him up there. Let's see. Greg Bondarenko says Sen's about to get swept by the Leafs. Sean C. says Giroux was fun to watch at times. He's very overrated by this fan base, just my opinion. I'll also note there that when Giroux first came into the league, like there was a lot of hope behind that guy. And again, like there was a lot of talent there. There was a lot of skill there. He's not a bad player. Not saying he's a bad player, just saying he's not one of the all-time greats. He ain't like he's not a surefire Hall of Famer. He'll have a case. I think it'll be a fringe case, but he'll have a case. Nick Johnson says, I wanted our rebuild to be over by the time Giroux became a UFA. He was the heartbeat of the Flyers for over a decade. That's fine, but he doesn't need to come back here. This team is like trying to move to the next phase. Allison says, last night's game looked like Giroux and Lawton had some issues to settle with each other. It's looked like that throughout the series, and it does kind of make you wonder. Like, is there some kind of beef there? Is this just like two guys that shared a locker room for a long time that have enjoyed the idea of kind of getting under each other's skin? I don't know. But there have been times where those two have kind of gotten into it, and it's very interesting. Allison says when he didn't send a goodbye tweet. I sometimes like rib the Giroux stance with that, but like, dude was here for a decade plus or whatever, and then said something to the effect of like, I'm going to have a curated thank you and farewell at some point, but this is, things are kind of crazy and topsy-turvy, and like for now, thank you. And then it ever happened. I'll admit, I sometimes stir the pot a little bit. I kind of rib the Giroux stance a little bit, but like, listen, Mekhi Becton had a better farewell letter to the Philadelphia fan base. I don't know what to make of that. Nick Johnson says, Giroux was the perfect player for the team. It took way too long to move him to the wing. They should have tried him on the wing when Schenn and Couturier were here. Maybe. But he was an effective center at the time. Now, towards the end of his Flyers tenure, I think you're right. They were a little bit late moving him to wing. Lawrence Fine over on YouTube says, I don't think Giroux was overrated, as Russ said. They gave him no help, no goaltending, no talent at his level. No, he's not Crosby level talent, but he was damn good. Bad decisions doomed him. Again, I can agree with all of that. I do think that there's a chance that if they had built a team around him better, they maybe would have been like a second-round team. I just don't think that he could be your number one guy on a Stanley Cup winning team. I'm not trying to be mean. I just don't think that he's the centerpiece of a team that takes you to a cup. And in fairness, like if Pronger hadn't gotten hurt, right, would you have put more of the winning pedigree on Giroux as the 1C or on Chris Pronger? Most people probably still would have looked at a team that goes on to win a cup and said, Pronger helped another team hoist that trophy. Could be wrong. Nick Johnson says, G and Lawton are intense players. Lawton learned from G. They are just playing hard against each other. Sure. Sean C. says, if you look at Giroux's numbers with the Flyers, beside the one Hart Trophy finalist outlier, he's really comparable to Konechny year to year. A few 80-point seasons in there, though. Sutliff says, Giroux's too laid back to be captain, but he's 66th all-time in points and could be in the top 50 if he plays another couple of years. The guy is really skilled and is the next tier after Crosby. I don't know what your tiers are. Could I say that he was in the next tier? At the height of his powers, he was in the next tier below the generational talent guys? Maybe. All time, though? No. I think there's probably, He's like third tier. They're the all-time greats. There are the Hall of Fame locks. And then the third level is where Giroux's at, where he maybe has an outside case. I don't know. Let's see. Jim Cochran says, Russ Giroux had a dream he was the LeBron of the NHL, leading his hometown team to the Cup. Shame reality hit and reminded him he's more familiar with first-round exits than championships. Kind of harsh, but okay. Greg Bondarenko seemed to lack leadership, something he didn't learn from Richards. Let's see. What? I'm trying to figure out what that is. Average Warzone guy says people compared Giroux to Crosby because Lavi made that claim that he was the best player in the world. Fans ate that shit up, unfortunately. That is true. I do think that a lot of this was the Laviolette thing when those teams went to play in the postseason. Let's see. Sean C. says, Avs won the Cup the year Giroux was traded, by the way, so he could have won the Cup already. That was my point, is that there was a much better situation for him to end up, and he didn't take it. He went to Florida, and by the way, leaves Florida. Florida ends up winning the Stanley Cup. I'm not saying that he was like such a loser or whatever, that Florida was like, oh, thank God the loser's gone. Remember, there was also a big trade to get Tkachuk, and they sent out Huberdeau, and a lot of people were surprised by it and thought that was going to be a huge miscalculation. So, again, I'm not saying, oh, such a losing player that as soon as he's gone, teams get better. That's not what I'm saying, so don't misconstrue that. Nick Johnson says, as a Giroux stan, Russ, I agree with you. Thank you, Nick. Thank you. Let's see. Jim Cochran says, building a team around G is like building a team around Michael Renberg instead of Lindros and Leclerc. Really good player, but not even close to a centerpiece. I don't know. That seems like a bit too much of a stretch. So, okay. That is where I wanted to end the show. Like that was the last thing that was on the thumbnail of the episode. Now I got to go back into the episode notes and include the thing about Tulsky with Carolina, about the mistrial. There are a lot of things happening today. But I want to thank everybody who joined me live on YouTube, X, and Facebook. If you haven't done so already, like the video, share the video, and subscribe. The last time I looked, and in fairness, I have been monitoring it a little bit. The last time I looked, the show was at, we were 36 subscribers short of 1,000. Whoop! 34 subscribers to go to get to 1,000. It would mean a lot to get to 1,000. I don't know why. There are arbitrary things in this life that I think about and that I get excited about. And so it'd be nice. If you can, do me a favor. Go like the video, share the video, subscribe, drop a comment in the comments below. But subscribing to the channel would be a really big help and greatly appreciated. Greg Bondarenko says, great show, Russ. Great way to end the week. Didi says, thanks, Russ. Let's go Phantoms. Oh, really quick on that, and maybe we'll get to it next week, and I might bring somebody on who covers the Phantoms more extensively. You have to feel really good if you're a Flyers fan when you're talking about like the players who could potentially end up here next year. Watching Bump and Lashenko do what they're doing is great. You're seeing Grebenkin, Emil Andre, others contributing right now in the playoffs for the Phantoms. It is a really nice development. And to answer Greg's question, are we leaning more towards afternoon shows? I'm not sure yet. Still trying to work a few things out. There are certain meetings that I have during the day that maybe would prevent this from being a common occurrence. I'm still deciding. I don't want to change the days. I do kind of like doing the afternoons a little bit better. We will talk about it at some point. I'll keep everybody posted. But until Monday, this has been the Russ Joy Show. You can find it on YouTube, X, and Facebook. Find it in podcast feeds on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Until Monday, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart. And it's also the name of the show. Talk to all of you Monday. Have a fabulous Friday, a wonderful weekend. I'll talk to you soon here on the Russ Joy Show. Bye, everybody.